Heaven Official's Blessing. Tian Guan Ci Fu by Mo Xiang Tong Xiu. Read by Plant Bones. Chapter 21, Part 2. The Buddha Egg doll had a very round face and body, like a giant calabash gourd. Its brows were long and its eyes black. The expression on its face was strong and good-natured, like that of a tiger, though also brimming with naivete. At present, it was glaring, plump with anger, and it carried a fat sword on its back, mighty gallant in its form. It was exactly like Lang Tiantou, except as a big, lovable toy. Xielian stopped smiling and exclaimed, Tiantou? Having lost its target, Rue returned with a whoosh and wrapped itself back around Xielian's wrist. Huatang walked over leisurely and flicked the Buddha Egg doll with his finger, snickering. Why does he look so foolish no matter what form he takes? Xielian picked up the Buddha Egg doll and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This, Sanlong, is this Tianqiu? Why did you turn him into this? Stop playing around with him and change him back. Nah. Bring him along. Let's go. Go where? Xielian asked. Huatang didn't answer. Dice were tossed up and they landed in his palm. In a blink, a cave appeared before them. To turn someone into a Buddha Egg doll was such a mischievous spell, very much Huatang's style, but it was also hard to undo. In any case, Xielian couldn't unravel it, so he simply held the doll in his hands. He was just about to follow Huatang when he remembered Feng Xin was still tossed aside and on the ground, and doubled back to pick up the sword. He strapped it onto his back, then followed Huatang inside. They hadn't been walking for long before the narrow path they'd started on at the cave entrance began to get progressively wider. Footfalls, echoes, and a faint light appeared in the distance ahead of them, and they could hear singing. When Xielian was led to Paradise Manor in Ghost City, he had also heard singing, but the graceful songs of the charming female ghosts at Paradise Manor were enticing and beautiful, intoxicating like soft whispers from the land of the tender. But the singing that they heard now was more like a chaotic caterwauling of demons, disorderly and awful. The two were nothing alike. Xielian couldn't help but ask, Sanlang, what is this place? Shh. Huatang quietly shushed him. Xielian's question was already spoken in a near whisper. Hearing the shush, he practically held his breath entirely. He soon discovered why they needed to be silent. Several floating green ghost fires drifted over from farther down the path, and when the balls of flame came close, he saw they were little ghosts dressed in green. On the head of each little ghost there was a small torchlight, as if each one was a big green candle. There was nowhere to hide in this cave, and the path was narrow. Xielian was about to reach for Fang Xin, but upon deciding Rue would be better suited for the situation, he dropped his hand again. But as the little ghosts passed them, they didn't bat an eyelash before moving on, still whispering amongst themselves. It wasn't that they didn't see them, but more they didn't think it strange to see them. Xielian looked at Huatang, but the one standing next to him wasn't the exceptionally handsome red-clad ghost king he knows, but rather another pale little ghost with a green flame on his head. So it seemed Huatang had changed them into fake skins without Xielian noticing. Thinking he must have been bearing the green flame upon his head as well, Xielian couldn't help but raise a hand to feel around. Why must they change their appearance into something so bizarre? Although he trailed off, Huatang obviously knew what he wanted to say. I mentioned that the green ghost Qirong's tastes are vulgar. All his lackeys have to dress like this. Xielian hadn't expected Huatang to bring him to Green Ghost Qirong's territory. Whenever the Heavenly Realm or the Ghost Realm mentioned Green Ghost Qirong, they all had to comment on how uncouth he was, and Xielian couldn't fathom why. But now that he'd learned that all of his little ghost subordinates had to dress uniformly like this, he could finally understand somewhat. If he only judged him by that self-given title of his, there was some peculiar form of elegance to the sound of night-touring Green Lantern, but to literally have these Green Lanterns wandering around at night, there was indeed a gap between his initial impressions and reality. "Didn't you already destroy his lair?" Xialian asked. "I did, but he escaped," Hao Chang replied. "Escaped for 50 years and built a new one." Xialian hugged the Hengtianqiu Budaweg doll close to his chest, and after making sure no one was around, whispered, "Sanlang, are you here to find the green ghost? Why don't you undo Tianqiu's spell and let him go before that, and then I'll accompany you?" Huachang obstinately refused. "No, bring him with you. I need Lang Tianqiu to meet someone." Xialian was curious. Huachang didn't act like he cared much for Lang Tianqiu, so why would he take him specially to meet someone? But things were awkward on both sides, so he couldn't speak any more on the subject. When the two finally emerged from the cave and tunneled opened into a wider space, only more caves appeared to greet them. There seemed to be caves and tunnels dug all over this mountain. Caves connecting caves, tunnels leading to more tunnels. Each entrance had many ghosts with green lanterns on their head going in and out, like a giant beehive or an anthill. If Xialian had come in by himself, there was no way he'd remember the path. And yet Huatong acted like he was at home and traversed the various tunnels and caves without hesitation, exceedingly at ease, like he knew the paths by heart. The two of them both wore their little green flame ghost skins, so no one stopped them on their journey. Xialian exhaled in relief, but Huatong thought he was sighing and asked, "What's wrong?" "Nothing," Xialian said. "I thought you would attack the lair head-on instead of sneaking in. I'm not too good with fighting, so I'm relieved." He meant it when he said he wasn't good with fighting. While he was skilled in combat, he had trouble dealing with the aftermath. Huachang seemed to puff out a laugh. "I did attack head-on the first time, but the moment Jirong found out, he ran away," Huachang said. "This time I'm here for the ghost himself, so of course I can't have him notice I'm here." "Is the green ghost the person who Sanlang wants Lan Qinzhou to meet?" Xialian wondered. "Is there a relationship between the two of them? Well, whatever he wants to do, I'll go with him. I'll ask him to undo the spell on Qinzhou later." Xialian still had the burning of Paradise Manor on his mind, so he couldn't help his guilty conscience. As he was thinking, Huatang spoke. "That useless trash can't do anything, but he's very vigilant. These little ghosts can't get near him, and it's not easy to disguise oneself as the henchman he trusts. There's only one way to get close to him." Just then, 4 little ghosts came by, laughing and chatting. Huachang slowed his steps, and Xialian followed his lead. They saw that the little ghosts had a queue of bound humans behind them, dragged along by a long rope. Among the collection of humans, some were ragged and unkempt, some wore extravagant clothes, but they all seemed to be young men and women under the age of 30. There was even a child, clutching the sleeve of one of the young men. They were probably father and son. All of their hands were bound, each looking terrified, and some even ready to faint as they trudged through the demonic cave. They brushed past Huachang, and without missing a beat, he turned around and seamlessly joined the end of the march. He gently elbowed Xialian, and he imitated Huachang's actions. When he looked over, Huachang had already changed skins again. This time, he was a clean-cut young man. Xialian knew he probably looked similar. The little band made twists and turns through the tunnels and caves. The little ghosts leading the group seemed quite content in their duties, and from time to time flaunted their meager authority, yelling and snarling at the prisoners behind him. "No funny business!
crying. Have you ruined our great ghost king's appetite? With your faces all covered in tears and snot, we'll teach you what it's like to want to die.
Out of the four great calamities, there had never been any rumors that the three supremes devoured human flesh. Only Green Ghost Tirong was gluttonous in this manner. No wonder his peers and enemies alike scoffed at any mention of him, mocking him as unsightly and ignorant. Earlier, Huatong said there was only one way to get close to Green Ghost Tirong. It appeared that mixing in with the food was the plan. As he walked, Xialian reached for Huatong's hand. Once he succeeded in grabbing hold of it, he felt Huatong freeze, like he wanted to pull away. It wasn't that Xialian didn't notice, but given the circumstances, there wasn't much room for thought. He held Huatong's hand tight and lightly drew a word on his palm. Save. Since Xialian had seen their plight, he had to save these people. The gesture was meant to inform Huatong of his intentions. After the word was written, Huatong gently folded his fingers and closed his palm. A moment later, the group left the tunnel and made their way into a massive cave. As soon as they entered the cave, a mass of densely packed objects appeared in their vision. Xialian squinted up at them, not quite able to tell what those objects were, when he felt Huatong grip his wrist and draw a few words on the back of his palm. Watch your head. Don't touch. At first, Xialian thought that there were many rags hanging from above, but when he looked closer, his pupils shrank. What rags? It was clearly a large crowd of densely packed people, suspended in mid-air with their feet up and heads down. The forest of upside-down corpses. But despite the suspended dead bodies, there was no bloody rain. It was because these corpses were all dried. Not a drop of fresh blood left flowing in their veins. Those dried corpses all looked like they were in pain, their mouths open wide, and there was a thin layer of snow-like crystal on their bodies and faces. Salt. In the deepest recesses of the cave, the lights shone bright. There was a giant chair, a long table, golden goblets, and jaded utensils. Such extravagance made it look more like a royal banquet than the deep mountain cave. A bit further away from the long table, there was an enormous steel cauldron, big enough that more than 10 people could swim within it. Red, boiling water bubbled in the cauldron. If anyone should accidentally fall in, it would be mere seconds before they were cooked through. The four little ghosts ushered the group of prisoners toward the cauldron, but some fell to the ground, shivering in fear when they saw what was waiting for them. In the midst of all the yelling, hitting, pulling, and dragging, Xialian suddenly felt that beside him, Huatong's arm had gone stiff, and he'd stopped moving. He turned to look, and saw that although Huatong still wore the appearance of a clean-cut man, his eyes were blazing with rage. Huatong was always smiling, but Xialian knew that his true emotions were always hidden deep within. Xialian had never seen such violent, blatant fury in his eyes. He followed the line of Huatong's sight, and in the next moment he felt his own breath hitch. Before that giant, extravagant chair knelt a person, or so it seemed, but upon closer look it was actually a life-size stone statue of someone. It was a rather interesting statue, sculpted in a kneeling position, its back facing him, its head downcast. It was the very picture of a homeless stray dog. One had to assume that the only purpose of making such a statue was to humiliate its subject. And Xialian didn't need to turn the statue around to know that its face must be exactly the same as his own. Generally, people don't know what their own backs looked like, but Xialian was different. He was more than familiar with how his own back looked. When the kingdom of Xianle first fell, to relieve themselves of anger, the people burned down his 8,000 crown prince temples and desecrated all of his statues, stole the gems on their swords and cleaned their attire of gold. Yet after all that, the rage continued to burn, and so they came up with a new idea, building kneeling statues like this one. The crown prince, once so highly venerated and worshipped, was sculpted into the form of kneeling down and begging for forgiveness. These statues were placed in crowded areas of town, so everyone was free to spit at or kick them when they passed, and in doing so, rid themselves of misfortune. Or some had even sculpted him prostrating and used the statue directly as a threshold, so that tens of thousands would walk all over it. In the first 10 or 20 years after the kingdom of Xian's fall, those statues were a common sight in many cities and towns. And so how could Lian not recognize the sight of his own back? Just then, the voice of a young man said,
That mangy little cur, Pei Xiu, had to cling to the leg of that man-whore dog Pei just to ascend in such a pitiful way. Who does he think he is? He's nothing more than an exiled stray right now, ruining my plans. Once I'm through with him, even after the winds dry up his corpse, no one will dare go collect it.
Before the person himself had even appeared, they could already hear his insults. Lian gazed over and saw a figure clad in green strut into the cave. Due to reasons not worth mentioning, Lian couldn't help but look at the top of his head first, and he was actually kind of disappointed to see that the figure only had a mask on and no light above his head. A bunch of little ghosts dressed in green crowded around the green-clad man, and he stood there surrounded by a circle of green light. This had to be one of the Ghost Realm's 4 calamities, the green ghost Tirong. Ever since Nanfeng had first mentioned the name, Lian had kept it in the back of his mind, wondering if this Tirong was the same Tirong that he knew. However, there was an unspoken rule that, demon or ghost, one was to hide their real name and bury their past life. Because of this, he didn't think they were the same person, only that the fake name had coincided with the real one. But from the looks of things, he was more certain that this was the Qirong he remembered. How could there be a second Qirong who was obsessed with the statue of a kneeling crown prince? And why would his voice sound so familiar? The little green ghosts that surrounded Qirong were loudly proclaiming him king and talking all at the same time. Lian figured out some of what had transpired from their chatter. It seemed that when Qirong sent a few of his henchmen to Ghost City, they failed to cause any havoc and were decimated by Huazang. He then regrouped and prepared to fight again, but before the second round had even started, the henchmen bumped into the exiled Pei Xiu on the road. Although the exiled in the mortal realm, Pei Xiu nevertheless was once a heavenly official, and also had nothing better to do. Thus, when those henchmen bumped into him, he thought he might as well clean them up, and so they were decimated once again. The moment Qirong received the news of how many henchmen he'd lost in such a short time, he was furious and started cursing nonstop.
Like ancestor, like descendant. That damned man Pei Ming probably has sores all over his crotch. I should chop off both his and Pei Xiu's rotten dicks and hang them up at their temples. Then whoever worships them will bleed pus every time they step, just like them.
Lian really had to suppress the urge to cover his ears. When Feng Xin got upset, his curses were the same, also too vulgar for the ears, but as much as he swore, it was obvious that his were only words of temporary anger with no real ill intent. Qirong's curses were different. Their targets could have no doubt that he truly wanted to condemn them to die as crudely as his curses. And he's wholly unafraid to take cheap shots, thoroughly crass and obscene. The group of little green ghosts agreed with Qirong loudly. He probably remembered the able subordinates he'd worked so hard to raise and continued. Too
bad that fiery good woman Sun Ji was captured by those 2 shameless Pei curs, and was wronged so miserably. She can't be saved, even now.
Lian couldn't fully agree with those words. Indeed, Sun Ji had a tragic story to tell, but not everything was General Pei's fault, like Qirong described. After all, those 10 brides were kidnapped by Sun Ji herself, and she was the one who killed them in cold blood. Fiery for sure, but whether or not she was a good woman was debatable. But to say little Pei was only ascended because he kissed up to General Pei was something Celian couldn't agree with at all. After seeing so many ascend and fall over the years, there was one thing Celian could say with absolute certainty. The skilled may not always ascend, but the ascended are always skilled. If one was powerless, then no matter who promoted them, they would not be able to overcome their heavenly tribulation, and could at most be an official in the middle court. The only other issue was that ability did not equal status, and that luck was also an important element. Otherwise, Pei Xiu would have established his own independent temple by now. Obviously, those things weren't within the realm of consideration for Qirong. He swore like there wasn't a single person in the 3 realms he didn't want cursed to death. He called Pei Ming a rotten man whore, Little Pei a kiss-ass, Jun Wu a faker, Ling Wen a damn bitch, Lang Tinchu a moron, Chen Yishen dog shit, Watermaster black-hearted, and the Windmaster a tramp. He probably didn't know Xu Qingxuan was actually a man. If Celian wasn't seeing it now with his own 2 eyes, he wouldn't be able to believe anyone could be so resentful. Finally, Qirong made it to the main point, which was how Ha Tong and that lurking ship-sinking black water looked down on him. They were mere supremes. One day for sure he'd make them kneel before him. Celian knew he should be angry hearing this, because it was impossible to imagine how that would ever play out, he couldn't help but find it hilarious instead. He stole a glimpse at Hua Tong. Hua Tong himself didn't react, but was instead still staring at that kneeling stone statue. Finally, thank the gods, Zirong seemed to be assuaged by his tirade of abuse, and changed the subject.
How did the thing go that I sent you guys to do? Have Chen Yishen and Man Pei started fighting yet?
He sat down as he spoke, lounging on his luxurious throne. He raised his legs and rested his boots on the shoulders of the statue, using it as a footstool. Xielian had been holding on to Hua Tong's arm and stopped him immediately when he felt him shuffle a step forward. He worried that his tug back might not be enough, so he drew another word in Hua Tong's palm. Thanks. Hua Tong recognized the word. He lowered his head and glanced at Xielian, who was watching him with gratefulness in his eyes, thanking him for his good intentions. Then Xielian shook his head lightly and drew the words, listen, and heaven. Judging by Qirong's talk, it seemed he sent some henchmen to complete a task, and had something to do with those heavenly officials. It couldn't be anything good, so Xielian had to keep listening. As for the statue getting used as a footstool, considering he'd been used as a threshold before, this really meant nothing to Xielian. It was only a piece of rock, not really him. Although he had only written those 3 simple words, when their eyes met, Xielian knew Hua Tong had understood their meaning. Hua Tong slowly gripped his hand tight and turned his head away, so Xielian could no longer see his expression. A little green ghost spoke up.
We followed our king's instructions and spread the rumor that Pei Ming wants to make Pei Xiu martial god of the West. He's been becoming more of a riot by the day, so we used that as an excuse and desecrated hundreds of Mingguang temples disguised as devotees from the palace of Qiying. And no one was the wiser. My king may not know, but all his devotees really are stupid. They saw us smashing temples and smashed along with us. Even more enthusiasm.
Qirong approved.
Keep fueling them. Chen Yishen can endure it, but I refuse to believe that Man Pei can put up with it.
Even if the rumors they were spreading weren't exactly false, malicious talk, like this... Even if the rumors they were spreading weren't exactly false, malicious talk like this was still full of ill intent. Especially Vile was doing something as unscrupulous as disguising themselves as mortals to sabotage temples and incite discontent. No wonder that when Qirong was mentioned, everyone in heaven said that although he wasn't that capable, he truly was annoying. Xielian noted mentally. If there's a chance, do tell Junwu to watch for any discord between those two heavenly officials that others might have sown. When Jirong finished talking business, he lay back, his long legs resting on the statue, changed position. The little ghost immediately knew what to do, and went to the small band of humans to pick out the best cuts. The one child in the group was probably not even 10 years of age, and wasn't very aware of his predicament. He blinked his large eyes and held on tight to his father's shirt, tugging at it the more scared he became. His young father's face was ashen pale, shuddering while trying to comfort him. "Don't be scared, don't be scared." Yet it was obvious he himself was terrified to the bone. One of the little green ghosts saw there was a child and was delighted. Reaching out to grab at him, the young father yelped and jolted. Xielian started moving, but before he knew what he was going to do, he felt the figure next to him dart out. Xielian turned his head to see, and Huatong had stepped out from within the crowd. Since Huatong had come specifically to seek out the green ghost, he should have lifted his disguise now that he'd found Jirong. Xielian had no doubt that Huatong was powerful enough to destroy everything in sight, and all would be powerless to stop him. Yet Huatong did not reveal his true form, and maintained the skin of that normal-looking young man as he lazily walked forward. A number of little green ghosts raised their weapons and shouted in alarm.
"Stop! What are you doing?"
Jirong asked curiously, with his feet still up.
"What's with that guy? Seize him!"
Huatong laughed. "Won't you show a little respect in the presence of Xianle royalty?" Jirong wasn't the only one shocked by those words. Even Xialian was taken aback. Instantly after, Qirong shot to his feet and snorted breath in his mouth, as if he'd laughed out of sheer anger.
"What fucking audacity! To make such a joke before me! Tell me then, what branch of the Shenle royal tree are you from? Which one?"
Huatong replied leisurely. "Prince Enle." Xielian felt the Lang Tianqiu Budawag doll in his arms jerk once. Prince Enle was a descendant of Shenle royal family, from the same generation as Lang Tianqiu. He was even said to have been friends with Lang Tianqiu. Jirong's derisive laugh could be heard from under the mask.
"Prince Enle? I think you're seeking your own death. Who told you to start shit in front of me? The person who sent you didn't teach you any history. Prince Enle was the last of the royal family of Xianle, and that family died out with him. Who are you to pretend to be a Xianle royalty before me?"
Huatong raised his brow. "Oh, died out? How?" Jirong shouted.
"Seize him! Seize him! Seize that weird guy!"
At his command, a large number of little green ghosts poured in all around the cave, yelling. In the midst of that pandemonium, Huatong only smirked faintly. His expression had been nonchalant, but in a moment it was like a layer of frost had fallen upon his face. His form suddenly flickered and disappeared, then reappeared in a blink behind Jirong. He grabbed the back of Qirong's head with one hand and smacked it down hard, like a child playing with a ball. "And who the fuck are you to be so insolent before me?" A loud bang, and that magnificent throne was suddenly hidden by flying debris, with dust filling the air. Xielian tugged the young child behind his body to shield him and blocked a few small flying rocks. When the dust settled, Jirong had disappeared. But upon closer inspection, he hadn't disappeared. Rather, his entire head was deeply embedded in the ground after Huatong's strike. Humans and ghosts alike screamed and dispersed. "Don't run away," Xielian shouted. If the people alerted all the ghosts within the cave, they'd be killed for sure. But of course, as always, no one listened to him. Xielian dropped his hands helplessly. In these circumstances, he had no time to worry about others. Across the cave, Hua Tong slowly knelt down. He used one hand to grab a fistful of Qirong's hair and pried his bloodied head out of the large hole in the ground. With that motion, the body was extracted along with it. After a brief moment of observation, Hua Tong seemed extremely amused and burst out laughing. Although he was laughing, the light in his eyes was off by 1,000,000 watts, eerie and terrifying. Rue flew out and struck away a few of the little green ghosts who were trying to cut down the escaping humans. Xielian then turned his head, his instincts telling him that something was wrong. Sunlung? Sunlung! Qirong's mask cracked, a few fragments falling. He spat up a mouthful of blood, yelling, "Somebody stop him! All of you, stop him!" Hua Tong had been violently bashing him about earlier, but now he seemed at ease, ready to have a chat about anything and everything. He snickered. Oh, didn't you know? There are some things in this world that are unstoppable. Like, for example, the sun setting in the west, or an elephant squashing an ant. Or me, taking your damn life. By the last line, his expression was unabashedly savage, and he raised Qirong's whole body high before smashing him to the ground once more. Another loud bang! Qirong's body was splayed on the ground, pulped into something worse than mush. With a soft crack, the mask on his face shattered into fragments, revealing half his face. If anyone were to see that half, they'd discover a shocking fact. The green ghost Qirong and the crown prince of Xianle, one ghost and one god. The difference of heaven and hell looked astonishingly alike.